When she arrived for a job interview, the woman smelled her missing mother's perfume in the Millionaire's office. She froze when he pulled the same bottle out of the drawer. The crumpled resume in Marissa Coleman's hand felt like her last lifeline. As she stepped through the marble-floored reception of Whitmore Holdings, her sneakers squeaked against the polished stone, a sound that seemed to announce her desperation to everyone in the pristine lobby. The receptionist's perfectly manicured fingers barely glanced up from her keyboard as she pointed toward the elevators with practiced indifference. 32nd floor, mister. Whitmore's expecting you. Marissa's stomach churned as the elevator climbed. Aunt Helen's worried face flashed through her mind. The woman who'd raised her since she was 8, now lying in a hospital bed waiting for a surgery they couldn't afford. The rent notice sat on their kitchen table like a death sentence. 7 days to pay or get out. This job interview wasn't just an opportunity, it was survival. The elevator doors opened to reveal a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than she'd make in a year. Each step toward Travis Whitmore's office felt heavier than the last. She'd researched him online. 43, heir to a business empire, philanthropist, and apparently her only shot at keeping her world from falling apart. She knocked twice on the heavy oak door before hearing a muffled, "Come in," the moment she stepped inside. It hit her like a physical blow. The scent cut through the sterile corporate air, orange blossom with something cold and smoky underneath. Her breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Mrs. Coleman. Travis Whitmore rose from behind his mahogany desk. Extending a hand she barely managed to shake. "Please, have a seat." But Marissa couldn't move. The fragrance wrapped around her like a ghost from her past, transporting her back to childhood memories she'd buried deep. Her mother's perfume, the one that had died with her in the fire that destroyed Carter's fragrance house 15 years ago. "I'm sorry," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "That scent is that garden of orange blossoms." Travis froze, his hand still outstretched. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, guilt, maybe both. "You know that fragrance. My mother created it." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Elaine Carter. She died in the fire at Carter's fragrance house. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Travis slowly sank back into his chair, his composure cracking just enough for her to see the man beneath the corporate facade. Without a word, he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small, elegant bottle, the same crystal design she remembered from her mother's vanity table. "How do you have that?" Her voice was stronger now, demanding. Travis twisted the cap with trembling fingers. Inside, tucked beneath the stopper, was a tiny piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully, as if it might disintegrate at his touch. "For tea, if I don't come back." The room seemed to tilt. Marissa gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white. "She left that for you. 15 years ago." His voice was heavy with something she couldn't quite identify. Regret, maybe guilt, the night before the fire. But why would she? Marissa's mind raced, trying to piece together fragments of a puzzle she'd never known existed. "You knew my mother." Travis stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She was trying to expose something dangerous. "I should have helped her, should have done more to protect her." He turned back to face her, his eyes haunted. "Instead, I hesitated, and she died because of my cowardice." The interview she'd come here for seemed like a distant memory now. This was bigger than a job, bigger than her rent money, or Aunt Helen's surgery. This was about her mother, about answers she'd stopped hoping to find. What was she trying to expose? Corporate fraud, sabotage, people in this very building who would do anything to protect their profits. He returned to his desk, carefully replacing the bottle in the drawer. "But that's not why you're here today. You need a job, and I need an assistant for our social projects division." The whiplash of returning to the mundane felt jarring. Social projects, charity work, community outreach, that sort of thing. The pay is good. $60,000 to start, full benefits, health insurance that'll cover pre-existing conditions. He watched her carefully as he mentioned the insurance, as if he knew exactly why that detail mattered. 60,000. It would solve everything. Aunt Helen's surgery, the rent, maybe even let her breathe for the first time in years. But the timing felt wrong. Too convenient. "Why me?" she asked. "My resume isn't exactly impressive." I've been waitressing and doing temp work for 3 years. Sometimes the best person for a job isn't the one with the fanciest credentials. He picked up her crumpled resume, smoothing it out with surprising care. Sometimes it's the one who understands what's at stake. Before she could respond, the office door opened without a knock. A woman in her 50s strode in, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marissa's car. "Travis, I need to discuss the Hartwell acquisition." She stopped mid-sentence when she noticed Marissa. "I wasn't aware you had an appointment." "Samantha Prescott, meet Marissa Coleman, our new social projects coordinator." Travis's voice carried a subtle edge. "Samantha is our majority partner." Samantha's smile was perfectly crafted and completely cold. "How lovely. I hope you'll find our company culture educational." Her eyes swept over Marissa's discount store blouse and scuffed shoes. "I'm sure you'll learn so much about how business really works." The condescension was subtle, but unmistakable. Marissa felt heat rise in her cheeks, but forced herself to stand and extend her hand. "I look forward to working here." Samantha's handshake was brief and calculated. "I'm sure you do, Travis, when you have a moment." Without waiting for an answer, she turned and left, her heels clicking against the hardwood like gunshots. "Don't mind Samantha," Travis said once she was gone. "She takes a protective interest in company operations, and the social projects division reports to her. To me, actually, which is why this position comes with certain guidelines." He pulled out a thick folder from his desk. "Company policy prohibits personal relationships between employees. It's particularly strict about fraternization between different departments." The warning felt oddly specific, but Marissa nodded. She needed this job too much to ask questions about corporate dating policies. "There's one more thing," Travis said, hesitating. "About your mother's perfume. It might be better if you didn't mention recognizing it to anyone else. Some people here have complicated feelings about that time period." "Complicated how?" "Just trust me on this one. Can you do that?" Marissa studied his face, searching for clues about what he wasn't telling her. The bottle in his drawer, her mother's final message. The timing of this job offer. None of it felt like coincidence, but $60,000 in answers about her mother's death were worth a little mystery. "I can do that." "Good." He stood and extended his hand again. "Welcome to Whitmore Holdings. Mrs. Coleman, I think this is going to be the start of something important." As she shook his hand, the scent of orange blossoms lingered in the air between them, carrying with it the weight of 15 years' worth of secrets and the promise of truths yet to be uncovered. Marissa's first week at Whitmore Holdings felt like walking through a beautiful museum where all the exhibits were slightly wrong. Her corner office on the 28th floor had floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that belonged in a design magazine. But the social projects she was supposed to coordinate seemed to exist more on paper than in reality. "The Community Garden Initiative," she murmured, flipping through files that read like fiction. According to the documents, Whitmore Holdings had donated $2 million to establish urban gardens in low-income neighborhoods. But when she called the contact number listed, it went straight to a disconnected voicemail. "Finding everything you need." She looked up to see Grant Donovan leaning against her doorframe, 2 coffee cups in his hands. Head of security wasn't usually a position that warranted designer suits, but Grant wore his like armor, perfectly tailored, professional, yet somehow suggesting he could handle himself if things got messy. "Coffee peace offering," he said, setting 1 cup on her desk. "I heard Samantha gave you the full welcome treatment yesterday. Is that what we're calling it?" Marissa accepted the coffee gratefully. It was perfectly prepared. 2 sugars, light cream. She hadn't told anyone how she liked her coffee. "How did you know?" "I pay attention." His smile was warm, but careful. "It's kind of my job." Grant settled into the chair across from her desk, and she noticed how he positioned himself, relaxed but alert. Like someone accustomed to watching for trouble, there was something solid about him that made her want to trust him, which probably should have been a warning sign. "So what's the real story with the social projects?" she asked, gesturing at the suspicious files. "What makes you think there's a real story?" "Well, for starters, half these organizations don't seem to exist, and the ones that do have no record of receiving our funding." She pulled out a particularly ridiculous report. "According to this, we built a homeless shelter that's apparently located in the middle of Central Park." Grant's laugh was genuine. You catch on quick. Most people in your position don't ask questions for at least a month. Most people in my position probably don't need the job as badly as I do. The admission slipped out before she could stop it. Something shifted in his expression. Your aunt's surgery. Her coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. How do you... Background checks are part of the hiring process. I'm sorry. That came out wrong. He set down his cup and leaned forward slightly. My mom went through something similar a few years back. The waiting, the insurance fights, feeling helpless. It's hell. The genuine concern in his voice made her chest tight. She's okay now. Yeah, she's good, tough as nails, just like I suspect your aunt is. He paused. Just like I suspect you are. The moment stretched between them. Loaded with something that definitely violated company policy about fraternization, Marissa forced herself to look away first. About those social projects. Right. Grant cleared his throat. Let's just say Whitmore Holdings likes to maintain a certain public image. The details don't always match the press releases. You mean they're fake? I mean they're complicated. He stood, suddenly all business again. Word of advice, some questions are safer to ask in private than in your office. Before she could ask what he meant by that, her computer chimed with an email marked urgent. The sender was Brandon Harlow. CFO, Miss Coleman. Please see me immediately regarding your project inquiries. B. Harlow. Grant read the subject line over her shoulder. That was fast. Usually takes them at least 2 weeks to notice when someone's asking the right questions. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. It's supposed to make you careful. He moved toward the door, then paused. Marissa, whatever Brandon tells you in there, remember that numbers can lie just as easily as words. 20 minutes later, she was sitting across from Brandon Harlow in his glass-walled office, feeling like a specimen under a microscope. Everything about him was precisely calculated. His tie knot, his smile, the way he arranged his hands on his desk. Even his friendliness felt like aggressive accounting. Marissa, so glad you're settling in well. His voice was smooth as silk and twice as artificial. I understand you have some questions about our community outreach programs. Just trying to get up to speed? Some of the contact information seems outdated. Ah, yes, that's always a challenge with charitable work. Organizations come and go, you know how it is. He pulled up something on his computer screen. But I'm sure we can get you sorted out. The important thing is that you focus on the current initiatives rather than getting bogged down in old paperwork. Current initiatives. Absolutely. In fact, we have an exciting new project coming up. A partnership with local schools to provide arts education funding. Very photogenic. Great for press coverage. He slid a folder across the desk. This should keep you busy for the next few months. Marissa opened the folder to find glossy brochures and budget projections that looked suspiciously similar to the fictional projects she'd been reviewing. This is generous funding for arts programs. We believe in giving back to the community. Brandon's smile widened. Of course, these programs require careful oversight, regular reports, detailed accounting, that sort of thing. I hope you're comfortable with that level of supervision. The word supervision sounded like a threat wrapped in corporate speak. I'm thorough with my work. I'm sure you are. Just remember, Marissa, that discretion is valued highly here at Whitmore Holdings. We've found that employees who understand the importance of confidentiality tend to have much longer, more prosperous careers with us. She met his gaze steadily. I understand. Excellent. Oh, and one more thing. I'd recommend focusing your efforts on future projects rather than auditing past ones. We wouldn't want you to waste time on programs that have already been concluded. Walking back to her office, Marissa's mind churned. The message was clear. Don't ask questions about the fake charities. Focus on creating new fake charities. And keep your mouth shut about all of it. The ethical implications made her stomach turn. But the practical ones were even worse. She needed this job. Aunt Helen needed this job. She was so lost in thought that she almost collided with Grant in the elevator. How'd it go with Brandon? He asked as the doors closed. He gave me a new project. Arts education funding. She showed him the folder. Very legitimate looking. Grant flipped through the materials, his expression growing darker with each page. This is the Morrison Foundation partnership. You know about it. I know the Morrison Foundation dissolved 3 years ago after their founder was indicted for embezzlement. He handed back the folder. Whatever Brandon's planning, It's not arts education. The elevator stopped at her floor, but neither of them moved to get off. Grant, what kind of company did I just start working for? He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. The kind where asking that question out loud could get you in serious trouble, and asking it quietly, that might get you answers. The elevator doors started to close, and he pressed the button to hold them open. There's a coffee shop on 5th Street called Moira's. They have terrible coffee but excellent privacy. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. It was definitely against company policy. It was probably dangerous, and it was absolutely the right thing to do. I'll be there. As she walked back to her office, Marissa caught a glimpse of Samantha Prescott through a conference room window. The majority partner was in deep conversation with Brandon, their heads bent over what looked like financial documents. When Samantha looked up and caught Marissa watching, her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. The scent of orange blossoms seemed to linger in the hallway, a ghostly reminder that some secrets were worth dying for, and others were worth living to expose. The coffee at Moira's was every bit as terrible as Grant had promised, but the corner booth in the back provided exactly the privacy he'd advertised. Marissa arrived first, her hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug as she watched the morning commuters rush past the rain-streaked windows. Grant slid into the seat across from her at exactly 7 a.m., looking like he'd been awake for hours. Sleep well. Not really. I spent most of the night thinking about fake charities and dead foundations. She studied his face. You don't seem surprised that I showed up. You strike me as someone who needs answers more than she needs safety. He signaled the waitress for coffee. Plus, you asked the right questions yesterday. Most people in your position just take the paycheck and look the other way. Most people in my position probably don't have their mother's mysterious death hanging over their heads. Grant's cup stopped halfway to his lips. What do you mean? Marissa had spent the sleepless night debating how much to trust him. Something about Grant felt different from the others at Whitmore Holdings. More honest, less calculated, but trusting the wrong person could cost her everything. The perfume Travis has, Garden of Orange Blossoms. My mother created it before she died in a fire 15 years ago. Elaine Carter. It wasn't a question. Grant set down his cup carefully. You're Elaine Carter's daughter. The confirmation hit her like a physical blow. You knew her. I knew of her. The Carter's fragrance house fire was big news back then. Lot of speculation about what really happened. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Marissa, what exactly did Travis tell you about that night? That my mother was trying to expose something. Corporate fraud, he said. That he should have helped her, but hesitated. The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. That's not the whole truth, is it? Grant was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. How much do you really want to know? Because once I tell you this, there's no going back to just needing a job to pay for your aunt's surgery. Her heart hammered against her ribs. I need to know. Your mother discovered that Samantha and Brandon were adulterating fragrances, taking expensive, artisanal perfumes, and cutting them with cheap synthetic compounds to increase profit margins. They were also systematically driving small perfumeries out of business by flooding the market with knockoffs. That's fraud, but it's not worth killing someone over. It is when you're talking about a $100 million operation with connections to international suppliers. Your mother wasn't just exposing a few bad batches. She'd uncovered an entire network designed to monopolize the artisanal fragrance market. Marissa's coffee had gone cold, but she barely noticed. And Travis knew about this. Travis was in love with your mother. Grant's voice was gentle but unflinching. Had been for years, even though she'd never given him any encouragement. When she brought him evidence of the fraud, he promised to help her expose it. But when push came to shove, he couldn't bring himself to destroy his business partners. The betrayal felt personal, even though it had happened before she was old enough to understand it. So he just let her walk into danger. Worse than that, he warned Samantha that Elaine was getting close to the truth. He thought he could convince them to shut down the operation quietly. Avoid the scandal. Grant's hands clenched around his coffee cup. Instead, he signed your mother's death warrant. The diner seemed to spin around her. The fire wasn't an accident. Samantha and Brandon hired professionals, made it look like an electrical problem in the workshop. Your mother was supposed to be at home that night, but she'd gone back to the shop to retrieve the evidence she'd hidden there. Grant reached across the table. his fingers brushing hers. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear." "How do you know all this?" "Because I've been investigating it for 3 years." His admission hung between them like a loaded gun. "I didn't come to work for Whitmore Holdings by accident, Marissa. I came here to find proof of what they did to your mother." The world tilted sideways. "Who are you?" "Grant Donovan, former NYPD detective, current head of security for a company I'm trying to bring down." His smile was grim. "My partner was killed investigating a case that connected to Carter's fragrance house. Officially, it was an unrelated gang shooting. Unofficially, he'd gotten too close to something that Samantha and Brandon wanted buried." Marissa pulled her hands back from the table. "So this is all just some undercover operation. You manipulated me into—" "No." The word came out sharp and decisive. "Meeting you wasn't part of any plan. Neither was caring about what happens to you." He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly vulnerable. "I've been alone in this for 3 years, Marissa. Do you have any idea what it's like to smile at the people who killed someone you're trying to avenge?" The pain in his voice was real. She could feel it, but trust felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. "What do you want from me? Help? Access? A reason to keep going that doesn't involve throwing my life away for revenge?" He leaned back in the booth. "And maybe someone who understands what it's like to lose everything to these people. I haven't lost everything. Haven't you? Your mother, your father, your family business, all gone because of Whitmore Holdings. How long before they decide you're asking too many questions? How long before your aunt's medical bills suddenly become unmanageable? Or you have an accident? Or your background check reveals some disqualifying information they mysteriously overlooked?" The threats weren't subtle, but they didn't need to be. Marissa had seen enough in her short time at the company to know that people who crossed Samantha Prescott didn't tend to prosper. "What kind of help are you talking about?" "Access to Travis. He's the weak link in their operation. Guilt makes people do stupid things. And he's been carrying this around for 15 years. Grant pulled out his phone, showing her a photo of a safety deposit box key. "Your mother hid evidence somewhere. Travis knows where, but he's too scared to retrieve it himself. And you think I can convince him? I think you're his chance at redemption. The daughter of the woman he failed to save, offering him a way to finally do the right thing." Grant's voice was steady but urgent. "But we have to move fast. Brandon's already suspicious about your questions, and Samantha doesn't tolerate threats to her operation." Marissa stared out the window at the city beyond, thinking of Aunt Helen in her hospital bed, of her mother's dreams going up in smoke, of 15 years of lies finally coming to light. The smart thing would be to walk away, take her salary, and pretend she'd never learned the truth. But smart had never been her strong suit. "What do you need me to do?" "Confront Travis, tonight, after hours, when the building's mostly empty. Push him until he breaks. He's close to the edge already. Get him to tell you where your mother hid the evidence. And then we finish what your mother started." Grant's hand found hers across the table. "But Marissa, once we do this, there's no going back. They'll know we're coming for them." She thought of the orange blossom perfume in Travis's drawer, of the note that had waited 15 years to be understood. Some debts could only be paid with truth. "My mother didn't get to finish her fight. Maybe it's time someone did." Grant's smile was fierce and hopeful. "Tonight then, and Marissa, be careful. These people have already killed to protect their secrets. They won't hesitate to do it again. The confrontation with Travis would have to wait." By the time Marissa returned to the office, her computer was flooded with urgent emails about the Morrison Foundation project, and Brandon had scheduled 3 meetings for the afternoon. It felt like deliberate interference, as if they sensed she was getting too close to something dangerous. But that evening, as she sat in her apartment staring at Aunt Helen's medical bills, Marissa made a different decision. She wasn't going to wait for Travis to break down and confess. She was going to find the evidence herself. The next morning, she called in sick and drove to Santa Fe, New Mexico. If her mother had hidden evidence 15 years ago, someone in the fragrance industry might remember where. Elaine Carter had been respected in artisanal circles. Someone would know something. The drive gave her 12 hours to think. And by the time she pulled into the dusty parking lot of Santos & Sons Essential Oils, she had a plan. The building looked like it hadn't changed since the 1980s, with hand-painted signs advertising lavender oil and desert sage. Help you find something." The man behind the counter had silver hair and hands stained with plant oils. His name tag read, Miguel Santos. "I'm looking for information about someone who used to buy supplies here. Elaine Carter, from Carter's Fragrance House in New York." Miguel's face lit up with recognition and sadness. "Elaine, beautiful woman. Terrible what happened to her. You a reporter. I'm her daughter." The change in his expression was immediate. "Marissa, ay, Dios mío, look at you. You have her eyes." He came around the counter and pulled her into a fierce hug that smelled of patchouli and sandalwood. "Your mother. She talked about you all the time. So proud." Tears pricked at her eyes. "You knew her well. She came here twice a year for special ingredients, always looking for something unique, something nobody else could replicate." He gestured toward the back of the shop. "Come, let me show you something." Miguel led her through a maze of shelves lined with bottles and jars to a small office in the back. On the wall hung a framed photo of her mother, younger than Marissa remembered, standing beside a beautiful Native American woman in traditional dress. "That's Elena Yazzie," Miguel explained. "Master perfumer from the Navajo Nation. Your mother studied with her for 3 years, learning traditional scent-making techniques. Elena taught her the secret of copal resin. Copal resin, sacred incense, used in ceremonies for thousands of years. Very difficult to work with, impossible to fake or synthesize. Your mother used it as her signature. 1 drop in every perfume she created, like a fingerprint." Miguel pulled out a small vial of amber-colored liquid. "Elena still harvested herself from trees in Arizona. Your mother was the only commercial perfumer she trusted with it." Marissa's heart raced. "So if someone had a perfume with copal resin, they would have gotten it directly from your mother, or from someone who stole her formulas." Miguel's voice grew serious. "Why do you ask?" "Someone at my mother's former business partner has a bottle of Garden of Orange Blossoms. They claim my mother left it for them." Miguel frowned. "That's impossible. Your mother never shared that formula with anyone. She told me it was too dangerous, that people would kill for it if they knew how much it was worth." "What do you mean?" "Garden of Orange Blossoms wasn't just a perfume, mija. It was a revolutionary process that could transform cheap synthetic fragrances into luxury products. Your mother discovered how to use copal resin to bind artificial molecules to natural ones, creating scents that tested as completely organic." Miguel's voice dropped to a whisper. "She said it could destroy the entire synthetic fragrance industry if it fell into the wrong hands." The implications hit her like a freight train. This wasn't just about adulterating existing products. Her mother had discovered something that could rewrite the entire industry. No wonder someone had been willing to kill for it. "Miguel, do you know if my mother had any other contacts? Someone who might know where she kept important documents?" "Try Elena. She lives in Asheville now, North Carolina. Runs a small cafe. Still makes traditional medicines and incenses." He wrote down an address on a piece of paper. "Tell her Miguel sent you, and Marissa, be careful if someone really has your mother's formula. They won't let you take it back without a fight." The drive to Asheville took another day, but Marissa couldn't stop now. She called Grant from a gas station in Texas, updating him on what she'd learned. "Copal resin," he repeated. "That changes everything. If we can prove the perfume in Travis's office contains that ingredient, we prove my mother made it specifically for him, which means he was lying about not knowing where the evidence is hidden." "Exactly. But Marissa, you need to be careful. If this formula is as valuable as Miguel thinks, Samantha and Brandon have billions of reasons to keep it secret." "I know, but I'm close to something, Grant. I can feel it. Where are you now?" "About 3 hours from Asheville. I'll call you when I find Elena." The cafe sat on a quiet street, lined with blue-painted Victorian houses, its windows filled with hanging plants and crystals. A small sign in faded paint read, "Moonshadow Cafe, coffee, tea, and healing." The scent of sage and coffee beans drifted through the open door. Inside, the walls were covered with Native American artwork and shelves of mysterious jars. A woman in her 60s sat in the corner, playing acoustic guitar and singing in a language Marissa didn't recognize. Her long gray hair was braided with silver threads, and her voice had the weathered beauty of someone who'd lived through both joy and sorrow. When the song ended, Marissa approached carefully. "Excuse me, are you Elena Yazzie?" The woman looked up, and Marissa felt a jolt of recognition. The eyes in the photo from Miguel's shop, older now but unmistakably the same. Depends who's asking. My name is Marissa Coleman. Miguel Santos in Santa Fe told me to find you. My mother was Elaine Carter. Elena's guitar slipped from her hands, clattering against the chair. Her face went pale, then flushed with emotion. You're Elaine's little girl. You knew her. Knew her. Child? I taught her everything she knew about the sacred arts. Elena stood and walked closer, studying Marissa's face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. You have her gift. I can smell it on you. Smell what? The copal? You've been near it recently? Very recently. Elena's voice grew urgent. Where have you smelled that scent? Marissa's skin prickled. At my job. Someone has a bottle of my mother's perfume. Impossible. Your mother destroyed all her samples before. Elena's voice trailed off, her eyes growing wide with realization. Unless she hid one. The emergency bottle. Emergency bottle. Your mother came to me 3 weeks before she died. Said she was in terrible danger. That people were trying to steal her life's work. She asked me to create a special bottle. One that would hide more than just perfume. Elena grabbed Marissa's hands. She said if anything happened to her, the bottle would find its way to the right person. Someone who could finish what she started. What do you mean, hide more than perfume? The cap, child. Your mother hollowed out the cap and hid something inside. Sealed it with copal resin, so only someone who understood the sacred arts could open it properly. Elena's grip tightened. Did you try to open this bottle? No, but the person who has it did. There was a note inside. That was just the first layer. There's more hidden beneath. Elena rushed to the back of the cafe and returned with a small ceremonial knife. Your mother said the real secret would only reveal itself to someone who understood the true power of the copal. Marissa's mind raced. Elena, I need to get back to New York tonight. No, child. If what you're telling me is true, then you're walking into the same trap that killed your mother. Elena's voice was firm. First, you need to understand what you're truly carrying, and you need to learn how to protect yourself from people who would kill for what she left you. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the Blue Ridge Mountains, and Marissa realized her search for answers was about to become something much more dangerous. Elena led Marissa through the cafe's back door, into a small garden where the air thrummed with the energy of growing things. Herbs and flowering plants created natural borders around a fire pit where copal incense burned in a clay bowl. The sweet, resinous smoke carried memories Marissa didn't know she had. Sit, Elena commanded, gesturing to a wooden bench. Before you go charging back to New York to confront killers, you need to understand what your mother really discovered. Marissa perched on the edge of the bench, every instinct screaming at her to get back to the city, to Grant, to the evidence waiting in Travis's drawer. Elena, people's lives are at stake. My aunt needs surgery, and there are others. Your Aunt Helen is fine. The voice came from behind them, soft and familiar and impossible. Marissa spun around to see a woman emerging from the cafe's back entrance. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked brown hair and a face marked by old burn scars along her left cheek and neck. But her eyes, those warm brown eyes that had sung lullabies and kissed scraped knees and promised that everything would be okay. Those eyes Marissa would recognize anywhere. Hello, baby girl. The world tilted sideways. Marissa's legs gave out, and she sank back onto the bench, gasping for air that suddenly seemed too thin. You're dead. You're supposed to be dead. I know. Elaine Carter, alive, scarred, but unmistakably her mother, sat down on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining careful distance. I'm so sorry, Marissa, for all of it, for letting you think I was gone, for missing your graduation, your 21st birthday, for not being there when you needed me. You let me grieve you for 15 years. The words came out as a whisper, then built to a shout. 15 years. Do you have any idea what that did to me? To Aunt Helen? Yes. Elaine's voice was steady but weighted with pain. I know exactly what it cost because it cost me the same thing. Do you think a day has gone by that I haven't wanted to call you? To hold you? To tell you how proud I am of the woman you've become? Then why didn't you? Marissa was on her feet now, pacing the small garden like a caged animal. Why fake your own death? Why abandon your daughter to chase some corporate conspiracy? Because they would have killed you too. The simple statement hung in the air between them. Elaine reached into her jacket and pulled out a manila folder, thick with documents and photographs. The night of the fire, I wasn't supposed to be at the shop. I was supposed to be home with you, helping with your 8th grade science project. But I got a call from someone claiming to be a federal investigator, saying they needed to meet urgently about my evidence against Whitmore Holdings. Marissa stopped pacing. It was a trap. The most elaborate trap I could have imagined. They had federal credentials, new details about my investigation that only law enforcement should have known. When I got to the shop, there were 2 men waiting. They weren't there to arrest Samantha and Brandon. They were there to kill me and destroy all my evidence. Elena handed Elaine a cup of tea that materialized from nowhere. Tell her about the explosion. They planted accelerants throughout the workshop, made it look like an electrical fire. But they wanted me to suffer first. Wanted to know where I'd hidden the evidence. Who else knew about it? Elaine's hand instinctively went to the scars on her neck. When I wouldn't tell them, they decided to make it look like I died in the fire anyway. But you escaped. Elena saved me. Elaine looked at her old mentor with obvious gratitude. She'd been worried when I called her that afternoon. Said I sounded scared. When she couldn't reach me that evening, she drove to the shop and found it in flames. She pulled me out through a back window, unconscious and badly burned. And then you just disappeared. We had maybe an hour before the fire department would start looking for bodies. Elena got me to a healer she trusted, someone who didn't ask questions about identity or insurance. While I was recovering, she created a new life for me. Allison Reeves, born in a commune that kept terrible records. No digital footprint, no family to miss her. Marissa sank back onto the bench, overwhelmed. But why stay dead? Why not go to the police when you healed? Because the people who tried to kill me had federal credentials. Marissa, real ones. Samantha and Brandon weren't just running a perfume scam. They were laundering money for people with connections high enough to make federal investigators disappear. Elaine opened the folder and showed her surveillance photos of men in expensive suits. These are the real power behind Whitmore Holdings. Russian oligarchs, cartel financiers, people who buy and sell governments. And you've been tracking them for 15 years. I've been staying alive for 15 years. There's a difference. Elaine's voice grew soft. Every morning I woke up wanting to come home to you. Every night I fell asleep hating myself for the choice I'd made. But they made it clear. If Elaine Carter ever surfaced again, everyone she loved would pay the price. So, what changed? Why are you telling me this now? Because you're not 8 years old anymore. And because you're already in danger. Elaine pulled out her phone and showed Marissa a series of text messages. Elaine has been monitoring Whitmore Holdings communications for years. 3 days ago, Samantha Prescott put a surveillance team on you. Yesterday, Brandon Harlow flagged your employment file for enhanced background screening. The messages were coded, but clear enough. Marissa Coleman was now a person of interest to the same people who'd tried to murder her mother. They know who I am. They suspected from the moment you recognized the perfume in Travis's office. But hiring you was too perfect an opportunity to pass up. Keep your enemies close and all that. They figured they could control you, use you, maybe even eliminate the last Carter if you became too troublesome. But they didn't count on Grant. Elaine's expression sharpened. Grant Donovan, former NYPD detective, current head of security for Whitmore Holdings. His partner Danny Reeves was killed investigating a case connected to your mother's death. She paused. Danny was my cousin, Elena's nephew. The connections clicked into place like puzzle pieces. That's how you knew Grant was investigating. You've been feeding him information. For 3 years, carefully, indirectly, always making it look like he was discovering things on his own. We needed someone inside Whitmore Holdings, someone with access and motivation. Elaine studied her daughter's face. We didn't expect him to fall in love with our primary asset. Heat flooded Marissa's cheeks. We're not. Baby girl, I've been watching you for weeks. You care about him, and he cares about you. In our business, that's either the most powerful weapon you can have or the most dangerous weakness. Elaine reached across the space between them and touched Marissa's hand for the first time in 15 years. Which one it becomes depends on what you choose to do next. What do you mean? I mean the evidence they're looking for. The the proof that can bring down Samantha and Brandon and their entire network. It's not hidden in some safety deposit box or storage unit. Elaine's eyes met her daughter's. It's here, in Asheville, in a notarized vault that's been waiting 15 years for the right person to claim it. The right person. The heir to Carter's fragrance house. My daughter, you. Elaine squeezed her hand. But once we open that vault, there's no going back. They'll know we're coming for them, and they'll use every resource they have to stop us. Elena stood and walked to the fire pit, stirring the copal incense until it flared bright. The question is, are you ready to finish what your mother started? Even if it means risking everything you have left. Marissa looked at her mother. Alive, scarred, but unbroken after 15 years of hiding. She thought of Grant, back in New York, playing a dangerous game with killers. She thought of Aunt Helen, waiting for surgery that expensive health insurance could provide. She thought of all the small perfumers who'd been driven out of business, all the lies built on her mother's stolen work. What's in the vault? Elaine smiled for the first time since their reunion, and for a moment she looked exactly like the mother Marissa remembered. Everything they've been afraid of for 15 years. Video evidence, financial records, recorded confessions, and the complete formula for Garden of Orange Blossoms, including the synthetic binding process that could revolutionize the entire industry, and the key, hidden in the bottle Travis has been carrying around like a guilty conscience. Your mother always did have a sense of irony. The revelation that her mother was alive should have been the most shocking moment of Marissa's life, but sitting in Elena's garden, surrounded by the scent of sacred smoke, it felt almost inevitable. 15 years of unanswered questions suddenly had context, and the fragmented pieces of her childhood were finally forming a complete picture. The bottle in Travis's office, Marissa said, processing the implications. You designed it specifically to hide the vault key. Not just the key, Elaine explained, pulling out a hand-drawn diagram. Your mother was brilliant, but she was also paranoid. The bottle cap contains 3 separate chambers. The first held the note Travis found, a red herring to make him think he had the complete message. The second chamber holds the actual vault key, and the third contains a digital hash of all the evidence in the vault. Elena finished. Cryptographic proof that the documents haven't been tampered with. Your mother was ahead of her time with digital security. Marissa studied the diagram, marveling at the engineering required to create such an elaborate hiding place. But how do we get it back from Travis? He's been carrying that bottle around for 15 years like some kind of religious relic. That's where your relationship with Grant becomes crucial, Elaine said. Travis has been eaten alive by guilt for a decade and a half. The appearance of Elaine Carter's daughter in his life isn't coincidence. It's providence. He's been waiting for a chance at redemption, even if he doesn't consciously realize it. You want me to manipulate him. I want you to give him what he's desperately wanted, a chance to do the right thing. Elaine's voice was gentle but firm. But we have to move carefully. Samantha and Brandon are watching you now, and they're not going to let you get close to Travis without knowing why. Elena stood and walked to a weathered wooden chest beside the fire pit, which is why we need to be smarter than they are. She opened the chest and pulled out what looked like an exact replica of the bottle from Travis's office. You made a copy. I made dozens, Elena said with satisfaction. Your mother brought me the original design 15 years ago, asked me to create multiple versions in case something happened to the evidence bottle. Most of them are just decorative. But this one, she twisted the cap and revealed an identical hidden chamber. This one contains something that will flush our enemies into the open. What do you mean? A false formula for Garden of Orange Blossoms, Elaine explained. Close enough to the real thing to fool initial testing, but containing a molecular signature that would be catastrophic if used in mass production. If Samantha and Brandon get their hands on this bottle, they'll think they've won the ultimate prize. And when they try to use it, every synthetic fragrance they create will destabilize within 6 months, creating a chemical reaction that makes them smell like rotting fish. Elena's grin was fierce. It would destroy their reputation and cost them hundreds of millions in recalls and lawsuits. Marissa felt a matching grin spread across her own face. So we trade the fake bottle for the real one. Not we, Elaine said firmly. You and Grant, Elena, and I can't be anywhere near Whitmore Holdings when this goes down. As far as the world knows, Elaine Carter is still dead, and it needs to stay that way until we're ready to expose everything. But once we have the real bottle, we retrieve the evidence from the vault, authenticate it with federal prosecutors who aren't on Samantha's payroll, and then we hold a very public press conference where Elaine Carter rises from the dead to tell the world exactly what Whitmore Holdings has been doing for the past 15 years. The plan was elegant and terrifying in equal measure. Marissa pulled out her phone to call Grant, then hesitated. How do I know I can trust him? You said yourself that caring about someone can be a weakness. Because he's had dozens of opportunities to betray you or turn you over to Samantha, and he hasn't taken any of them, Elaine said. Because he's been feeding us information for 3 years, even when it put his cover at risk. And because, she paused, looking uncomfortable, because he reminds me of your father. This was the first time her mother had mentioned her father in any meaningful way. Marissa had grown up with only the vaguest details. A brief relationship, a good man who died in a car accident before she was born. Mom, later, Elaine said quickly. Right now, we need to focus on staying alive long enough to bring these people to justice. Call Grant, but be careful what you say. Assume every communication is monitored. Marissa dialed Grant's number, her heart racing as it rang. When he answered, his voice was tight with worry. Thank God, I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. Where are you? Asheville, Grant. I found something big. Are you alone? I'm with friends. Listen, I need you to do something for me. But it's going to sound crazy. Crazier than corporate executives murdering people over perfume recipes. I need you to get me a meeting with Travis. Tonight, after hours, in his office. Tell him I have new information about my mother's evidence. There was a long pause. Marissa, that's incredibly dangerous. If Samantha or Brandon find out, they won't. This is about Travis finally getting the chance to do what he should have done 15 years ago. She took a deep breath. Grant, do you trust me? With my life? Then set up the meeting. And Grant, bring whatever recording equipment you can hide on yourself. We're going to need proof of everything that gets said. What aren't you telling me? Everything. But after tonight, there won't be any more secrets between us. I promise. After she hung up, Elena handed her a small leather pouch. Copal powder. If you find yourself in real danger, throw this into any open flame. The smoke will disorient anyone who doesn't know what it is and give you a chance to escape. You think it's going to come to that? I think Samantha Prescott hasn't stayed in power for 20 years by letting threats to her empire walk away quietly, Elaine said. But your mother didn't raise a coward, and neither did Helen. The mention of her aunt sent a fresh wave of guilt through Marissa. I should call Aunt Helen, let her know I'm okay. Already taken care of, Elena said. I've been watching over her for years, making sure her medical needs were met. The surgery she needs, it's already scheduled and paid for, has been for months. You've been helping us financially. I've been trying to take care of my family from a distance, Elaine said. It's not the same as being there, but it's what I could do. Marissa felt tears threaten and blinked them back. There would be time for emotional reunions later. Right now, she had a job to finish. I need to get back to New York. Take my car, Elena said, handing her a set of keys. It's clean. No traceable registration, no GPS tracking. And Marissa, when this is over, when Samantha and Brandon are in federal custody and the truth is finally out, will you come back here? Will you let me try to be your mother again? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with 15 years of absence and the promise of a future that might finally be free from fear. Ask me again when we're both still alive, Marissa said. Fair enough. Elaine pulled her daughter into a fierce hug that smelled of copal smoke and vanilla, and all the childhood memories that had sustained Marissa through the hardest moments of her life. Go finish this, baby girl. Show them what a Carter woman can do when she stops running and starts fighting. As Marissa drove through the North Carolina mountains toward her confrontation with Travis Whitmore, she carried with her the weight of 15 years' worth of secrets and the hope that truth, that, no matter how long buried, would finally find its way to the light. The drive back to New York gave Marissa 12 hours to think, and by the time she reached the city limits, she'd run through every possible scenario for how the evening could go wrong. Grant had texted her the meeting details. Travis's office at 9 p.m. Building security would be minimal, and he'd have recording equipment ready. What he couldn't guarantee was whether they'd walk out of there alive. She parked Elena's untraceable Honda in a public garage 6 blocks from Whitmore Holdings and walked the rest of the way, the fake perfume bottle heavy in her jacket pocket. The evening air carried the scent of rain and exhaust, urban smells that seemed harsh after the clean mountain air of Asheville. Grant was waiting in the lobby when she arrived. His usual composed expression cracked with worry. "You look different," he said, studying her face. "I know things I didn't know 3 days ago. Good things or bad things? Both." She glanced around the empty lobby. "Is the building secure?" "As secure as I can make it. I've disabled the cameras on the 32nd floor and created a false log showing Travis left hours ago. But Marissa, if this goes sideways, it won't." She hoped she sounded more confident than she felt. "Did you bring the recording equipment?" Grant opened his jacket to reveal a small digital recorder clipped to his shirt. "Audio only, but it'll pick up everything in the room. There's also a backup transmitter that sends to my personal server." They rode the elevator to the 32nd floor in tense silence. The hallway was dark except for emergency lighting, giving the corporate elegance an ominous edge. Travis's office door was slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. "He's here," Grant murmured, his hand instinctively moving toward the concealed weapon Marissa was certain he carried. She knocked twice and pushed the door open. Travis Whitmore sat behind his desk, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past week. The perfume bottle sat in front of him, opened, with the tiny note spread beside it. "Marissa." His voice was hoarse. "Grant said you found something about your mother's evidence." "I did." She sat down across from him, Grant taking a position near the door. "But first, I need you to tell me the truth about the night she died. I've told you everything." "No, you haven't." Marissa's voice was steady but implacable. "You told me you hesitated to help her. You told me you should have done more. But you didn't tell me that you warned Samantha and Brandon that my mother was getting close to exposing them." Travis went white. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I've spent the last 3 days talking to people who were there, people who remember what really happened." She leaned forward. "You were in love with my mother, and when she came to you with evidence of the fraud, you promised to help her. But when push came to shove, you chose to protect your business partners instead of the woman you claimed to care about. It wasn't that simple, wasn't it?" Marissa's voice rose. "My mother trusted you, and you betrayed her to save your own skin. You warned Samantha that Elaine was becoming a problem, and they decided to solve that problem permanently." Travis buried his face in his hands. "You don't understand. Samantha had leverage on me, information that could have destroyed everything I'd built. She said if I helped her handle the Elaine situation quietly, everyone could walk away clean. Everyone except my mother. I thought they were just going to buy her off, maybe threaten her into keeping quiet. I never imagined they would." His voice broke. "When I found out about the fire, when I realized what I'd done, I wanted to go to the police. But by then, I was an accessory. My phone records would have shown I'd warned them." Grant stepped closer to the desk. "So you kept quiet and let everyone think it was an accident. What else could I do? Coming forward wouldn't have brought Elaine back. It would just have destroyed more lives." "Coward," Marissa said quietly. 15 years of cowardice." "Yes." Travis looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed. "I'm a coward. I've lived with that knowledge every day for 15 years. The guilt has eaten me alive, and I deserve every moment of it. Self-pity isn't going to bring my mother back," Marissa said. "But helping me finish what she started might mean something." "What do you mean?" Marissa pulled the fake bottle from her pocket and set it on the desk beside the real one. "My mother hid evidence, Travis, not just documents. Video recordings, financial records, everything needed to bring down Samantha and Brandon's entire operation. But the location of that evidence is hidden in the bottle you've been carrying around for 15 years. Travis looked confused. "The note is just an apology. For tea, if I don't come back." "That's what you were supposed to think, but there's more hidden in the bottle. My mother was a master perfumer, Travis. She knew how to create things that weren't what they appeared to be." Marissa gestured toward the bottles. "One of these contains the key to evidence that can destroy the people who killed her. The other contains something that will help us expose them when they try to use it." "I don't understand." "We're going to trade bottles," Grant explained. "You keep the fake one. We take the real one. When Samantha and Brandon inevitably pressure you to give them access to Elaine's final formula, you hand over the decoy." And then they discover that trying to mass produce a formula based on false information can be very, very expensive, Marissa said. Travis stared at both bottles. How do I know which is which? You don't. That's the point. Marissa stood. But if you help us, if you finally do the right thing, it won't matter, because we'll have what we need to expose everything. And you'll finally be able to stop carrying around the guilt of my mother's death. The office fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. Travis picked up the original bottle, turning it over in his hands. If I do this, they'll know I betrayed them. Samantha doesn't forgive disloyalty. If you don't do this, you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you had a chance to make things right and chose cowardice again, Marissa said. Travis was quiet for a long moment, then slowly pushed the original bottle across the desk toward her. What do you need me to do? Nothing. For now, just act normal. Attend your meetings. Pretend everything is fine. In a few days, maybe a week, Samantha or Brandon will approach you about accessing my mother's work. When they do, you give them the false bottle and tell them you've been waiting 15 years for someone to finally ask. And if they don't believe me, they will, Grant said, because it's exactly what they've been hoping to hear since the day Elaine died. As Marissa slipped the real bottle into her jacket, Travis looked up at her with something approaching hope. Do you really think this will work? I think my mother was the smartest person any of us ever met, and she spent years planning for exactly this scenario. Marissa headed toward the door, then paused. Travis, when this is over, when the truth comes out, you're going to have to face the consequences of what you did. But maybe, for the first time in 15 years, you'll be able to sleep at night. Walking out of Whitmore Holdings with the real bottle felt like carrying a live grenade. Grant stayed close beside her, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. They were almost to the garage when Marissa's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We know what you're doing. Stop now, or people you care about will get hurt. Grant, she said, showing him the message. His face hardened. They're making their move. We need to get you somewhere safe and call in federal backup. No, Marissa said, thinking of her mother hiding in North Carolina for 15 years. We finish this tonight. The Whitmore Holdings annual gala was everything Marissa had expected from a company that spent millions on fake charity projects. Excessive, ostentatious, and designed to impress people with more money than sense. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and enough flowers to fund a small hospital, while New York's elite mingled in designer gowns and $1,000 suits. Marissa felt like an imposter in her borrowed black dress, one of Elena's purchases from her years of careful preparation. But she wasn't here to fit in. She was here to tear down the carefully constructed facade that had protected her mother's killers for 15 years. You clean up nice, Grant murmured, appearing beside her with 2 champagne glasses. His tuxedo was perfectly tailored, but she could see the slight bulge of recording equipment beneath his jacket. Are we sure about the timing? Marissa asked. Accepting the champagne, she had no intention of drinking. Her hands needed to stay steady tonight. Federal prosecutors are standing by. The moment we transmit the evidence, they'll move in with arrest warrants. But we only get one shot at this. Across the ballroom, Samantha Prescott held court near the main stage, resplendent in silver silk that probably cost more than most people's cars. She was in her element, the picture of philanthropic success, graciously accepting praise for Whitmore Holdings' generous community contributions. There's Travis, Grant noted. Travis looked miserable in his formal wear, like a man attending his own execution. He caught Marissa's eye across the crowd and gave an almost imperceptible nod. The switch had been made. Samantha and Brandon now possessed the false bottle, believing they finally had Elaine Carter's revolutionary formula. And there's our signal, Marissa said, as Brandon Harlow approached the microphone on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Brandon's voice carried across the ballroom with practiced charm. Tonight, we're not just celebrating another successful year for Whitmore Holdings. We're announcing a revolutionary partnership that will transform the fragrance industry forever. The crowd quieted, intrigued by the promise of something bigger than the usual corporate platitudes. 15 years ago, the perfume world lost one of its most innovative minds in the tragic fire at Carter's fragrance house. Elaine Carter's work was thought to be lost forever. Brandon paused for dramatic effect. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that Whitmore Holdings has recovered her final, greatest creation, A revolutionary process that will democratize luxury fragrances for consumers worldwide. Murmurs of excitement rippled through the crowd. Marissa felt sick watching them capitalize on her mother's memory, but this was exactly what they'd planned for. But before we reveal this groundbreaking innovation, Brandon continued, I'd like to invite our newest team member to say a few words about the legacy we're honoring tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Marissa Coleman, daughter of the late Elaine Carter. The spotlight found her in the crowd, and suddenly hundreds of eyes were fixed on her face. This wasn't part of the plan. Brandon was improvising, probably hoping to use her as a prop to legitimize their theft of her mother's work. Grant's hand touched her elbow. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Marissa handed him her champagne glass and walked toward the stage, her heart hammering against her ribs. The stage felt enormous and blindingly bright. She could see reporters in the crowd, cameras recording everything. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Harlow, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom sound system. It's true that my mother's work was thought to be lost in the fire that killed her 15 years ago, but what Mr. Harlow didn't mention is that the fire wasn't an accident. The crowd stirred uneasily. Brandon's smile faltered. My mother discovered that certain executives at Whitmore Holdings were engaged in massive fraud, adulterating expensive fragrances with cheap synthetics, driving artisanal perfumers out of business, and laundering money through fake charity organizations. Ms. Coleman, Samantha's voice cut through the murmurs as she approached the stage. I think there's been some confusion. No confusion at all. Marissa reached into her purse and pulled out the real perfume bottle. This is Garden of Orange Blossoms, my mother's final creation. For 15 years, Travis Whitmore has carried it as a reminder of his guilt. Tonight, I'm going to show you what my mother really left behind. She twisted the cap, and even from the stage, she could see Travis go pale. This wasn't the false bottle. This was the real one, the one containing the actual evidence. The first thing she left was a message. Marissa unfolded the tiny note everyone had seen before. For tea, if I don't come back. But that was just the beginning. She twisted the cap further, revealing the second hidden chamber. A small silver key fell into her palm, catching the stage lights. The second thing she left was this, the key to a safety deposit box containing 15 years' worth of evidence against the people who murdered her. The ballroom erupted. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashed, and security guards started moving through the crowd toward the stage. But the third thing, Marissa said, her voice rising above the chaos, was this. She twisted the cap one final time, revealing a tiny digital storage device no bigger than a fingernail. A complete record of every illegal transaction, every fraudulent charity, every bribe and every threat made by Whitmore Holdings and its partners. Audio recordings, financial documents, video evidence, everything needed to prove that Samantha Prescott and Brandon Harlow are not philanthropists. They're criminals. Grant appeared at the edge of the stage, holding a tablet computer. And now that evidence is being transmitted directly to federal prosecutors who are already on their way here with arrest warrants, Samantha's mask of composure finally cracked. You stupid girl. You have no idea what you've just done. The people we work with don't forgive. The people you work with are about to discover that their money laundering operation has been compromised, Marissa interrupted, along with their identities, their financial networks, and their escape routes. My mother was very thorough. Brandon was backing away from the stage, speaking urgently into his phone. But Grant's security team, the real security team, not Whitmore Holdings employees, was already positioning themselves at all the exits. Ladies and gentlemen, Marissa addressed the crowd, which had gone silent with shock. I'd like you to meet someone. A door at the back of the ballroom opened, and Elena Yazzie walked in, accompanied by a woman with silver-streaked hair and burn scars on her neck. My mother, Elaine Carter, who has been in federal protective custody for 15 years, waiting for this moment. The crowd gasped as Elaine walked toward the stage. Even from a distance, Marissa could see tears streaming down her mother's face. The woman these people tried to murder, Marissa continued, has spent 15 years documenting their crimes. Tonight, justice finally catches up. Federal agents were streaming into the ballroom now, their badges clearly visible. Samantha Prescott stood frozen as an agent approached her with handcuffs. Samantha Prescott, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. Brandon tried to run, but was tackled by 2 agents before he reached the exit. Travis Whitmore walked slowly toward the stage, his hands raised. "I'm ready to surrender," he called out. "I have a full confession prepared." As the chaos swirled around her, Marissa felt a profound sense of completion. 15 years of questions had finally been answered. 15 years of injustice was finally being corrected. Elaine reached the stage and climbed the steps, her eyes never leaving her daughter's face. "Hello, baby girl," she said softly. "Hello, Mom." And for the first time in 15 years, Marissa Coleman felt like she was truly home. The federal courthouse buzzed with activity as reporters crowded the steps, their cameras trained on every entrance. Inside, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh spread the evidence across the conference table like pieces of a puzzle that had finally been solved. 15 years of documentation, she said to Marissa and Grant, who sat across from her in the sterile government office. Your mother was incredibly thorough. Audio recordings, financial transactions, correspondence with international crime syndicates. We have enough evidence to prosecute not just Samantha and Brandon, but their entire network. Marissa watched through the window as protesters gathered outside, some supporting the prosecution, and others claiming the charges were politically motivated. The story had exploded across every news network. A mother who faked her death to protect her daughter, a corporation that murdered to protect its profits, and 15 years of secrets finally brought to light. "What about Travis?" Grant asked. "Mr. Whitmore's cooperation has been valuable. His confession provided crucial corroboration of your mother's evidence." Walsh consulted her notes. "He'll face charges for accessory after the fact and obstruction of justice, but his cooperation agreement should limit his sentence to 2 to 3 years. And Samantha and Brandon, they're looking at life in prison, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, money laundering, the list goes on. Brandon's already trying to negotiate a plea deal, but we don't need his testimony anymore." The conference room door opened, and Elaine entered with Elena close behind. Elaine looked different in daylight, older than Marissa's memories, marked by the years of hiding, but with a strength that 15 years of fear hadn't managed to break. "How are the asset seizures going?" Elaine asked, taking a seat beside her daughter. "Better than expected. We've frozen over $200 million in assets tied to the money laundering operation. The fake charities alone accounted for nearly $50 million in fraudulent donations." Walsh smiled grimly. "The real charities that were harmed by their operations will see significant compensation. And the international connections. That's where things get interesting." Walsh pulled out a thick folder. "Your evidence led us to a network of oligarchs and cartel financiers who were using Whitmore Holdings to clean their money. 3 governments have already issued arrest warrants, and Interpol is coordinating a massive sweep." Grant leaned forward. "What about the people who provided federal credentials to the men who tried to kill Elaine? Internal Affairs is handling that investigation. Let's just say some former federal employees are going to have very uncomfortable conversations with prosecutors in the coming weeks." Marissa felt a weight she'd carried for weeks finally lifting. Justice was slow, but it was coming. "There's one more thing," Walsh said, her expression growing serious. "We found something in Samantha's private files that you need to know about." She slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were medical records, birth certificates and DNA tests. "What is this?" Elaine asked, scanning the documents. "For years, Samantha claimed to have a son with Travis, used the child as leverage to control his votes on the board and manipulate company decisions." Walsh paused. "The child never existed." The room fell silent. Marissa read through the documents, her disbelief growing with each page. She faked an entire pregnancy, more sophisticated than that. She created a complete false identity, birth certificate, medical records, even school enrollment documents. As far as official records were concerned, Michael Whitmore Prescott was a real child who lived with his mother and occasionally visited his father. Travis's words from that night in his office suddenly made sense. The leverage Samantha had held over him, the guilt that had controlled him for years. It was all based on a lie. How did she maintain the deception for so long? Grant asked. Money and connections. She had a network of people creating false documents, fake medical appointments, even staged school events. Travis was so consumed with guilt over Elaine's death that he never questioned why he could never seem to connect with his son. Elaine shook her head in amazement. She used his guilt as a weapon against him. And it worked for 15 years. Travis made every board decision based on what he thought was best for a child who didn't exist. Marissa thought about the broken man she'd confronted in his office, carrying the weight of two impossible burdens: responsibility for her mother's death and obligation to a son who turned out to be a ghost. Does he know yet? We told him this morning. I think it was almost a relief. One less thing to feel guilty about. Walsh gathered the documents. It also explains why Samantha was so confident she could control the company indefinitely. She had the majority share. A puppet CEO manipulated by fake paternity, and a money laundering operation that generated enormous profits. What happens to Whitmore Holdings now? Travis has agreed to sell his shares and dissolve the company. The legitimate assets will be liquidated, and the proceeds distributed to the real charities that were harmed by their operations. Walsh looked at Elaine. That includes a substantial settlement for Carter's fragrance house and its heir. I don't want their money, Marissa said immediately. It's not their money, Elaine corrected gently. It's compensation for what was stolen from us. Your mother's formulas, her reputation, her life's work. All of it has value that was taken illegally. But we could use that money to do something meaningful, Elena added. Something your mother would have been proud of. Marissa looked at her mother, seeing not just the woman who had raised her, but the brilliant perfumer who had died protecting her work and her daughter. What did you have in mind? A school, Elaine said. A place where artisanal perfumers can learn traditional techniques without being crushed by corporate interests. Elena and I have been discussing it for years. The Carter Yazzie Institute for Traditional Perfumery, Elena added with a smile. Located in Asheville, where the air is clean and the traditions run deep. The idea felt right in a way that surprised Marissa. Not revenge, not even simple justice, but creation. Building something beautiful from the ashes of something terrible. What about the Garden of Orange Blossoms formula? Grant asked. The real one. We're going to do something your mother always intended, Elaine said. Release it as open source information. Let small perfumers around the world use it to compete with the synthetic manufacturers. Won't that hurt its value? Its value was never in exclusivity, Elaine explained. It was in democratization. Your mother believed that beautiful scents should be accessible to everyone, not just people who could afford luxury brands. Walsh closed her files and stood. We'll need you to testify when the trial begins. But the evidence is so overwhelming that I expect plea deals from most of the defendants. This should all be resolved within 6 months. As they left the courthouse, Marissa found herself walking between her mother and Grant, flanked by the two people who had risked everything to bring her to this moment. The protesters had largely dispersed, leaving only a few dedicated reporters and a handful of supporters holding signs reading, "Justice for Elaine." So what now? Grant asked. Now we go home, Elaine said. All of us. To Asheville, where we can start building something new. Marissa looked up at the courthouse steps where justice was finally being served, then at the city where her mother had been forced to fake her death to protect the truth. Both chapters of her life were ending, but a new one was beginning. Home, she repeated. And for the first time in 15 years, the word felt like a promise instead of a memory. 6 months later, the Carter Yazzie Institute for Traditional Perfumery occupied a renovated 19th century mansion on the outskirts of Asheville, its wraparound porches overlooking gardens where students cultivated the plants that would become their art. Marissa stood at the kitchen window of the smaller house she shared with Grant, watching the morning mist rise from the mountains while coffee brewed behind her. You're up early. Grant's voice was rough with sleep as he wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. Couldn't sleep, too excited? She leaned back against his chest, savoring the solid warmth of him. It's opening day. Through the window, they could see Elena directing the final preparations at the main building. 24 students from around the world had come for the Institute's inaugural session. Traditional perfumers from India, apprentice distillers from France, botanical artists from South America, and dreamers from small towns across America who wanted to learn the ancient art of capturing scent. Your mother's downstairs already, Grant said. I think she's more nervous than you are. Elaine had thrown herself into the Institute project with the passion of someone making up for 15 lost years. She taught classes on advanced distillation techniques, maintained the botanical gardens, and spent her evenings writing what would become the definitive textbook on traditional perfumery. The burn scars on her neck had faded somewhat, but they remained a visible reminder of the price she'd paid for pursuing truth. "How's Aunt Helen settling in?" Grant asked. "Better than expected. She says the mountain air is helping her recovery, but I think she just likes having Elena fuss over her." Marissa smiled. Two matriarchs running the same household was bound to be interesting. Helen had moved to Asheville after her successful surgery, paid for, as it turned out, by Elena's careful financial planning over the years. The two older women had bonded over shared concern for Marissa's well-being and a mutual appreciation for strong coffee and stronger opinions. "Speaking of which," Grant said, releasing her to pour coffee into 2 mugs, "your mother wants to talk to us this morning about the future." "What kind of future?" "The kind that involves expansion, apparently. 3 other cities have approached us about opening satellite schools. The institute had exceeded everyone's expectations. The combination of Elaine's reputation, Elena's traditional knowledge, and the media attention from the Whitmore Holdings scandal had created unprecedented interest in artisanal perfumery. Orders for custom fragrances were already backing up for months, and the waiting list for classes stretched into the following year. They walked across the dewy grass to the main building, where the scent of jasmine and sweet orange from the distillation labs mixed with the mountain air. Inside, students were setting up their workstations for the day's lessons, their excited chatter creating a buzz of anticipation that reminded Marissa why they'd chosen this path. Elaine was in her office, surrounded by botanical samples and correspondence from perfumers around the world. She looked up when they entered, her face lighting with the smile that had taken Marissa months to get used to seeing again. "Ready for the big day?" "As ready as we can be," Marissa said, settling into one of the chairs across from her mother's desk. "Grant says you want to discuss expansion." "In a way," Elaine pulled out a thick folder. "But first, there's something else. The federal prosecutors called yesterday. The trials are finally over. And Samantha got life without parole. Brandon got 35 years. Travis was sentenced to 18 months, with credit for time served and cooperation." Elaine's voice was matter-of-fact, but Marissa could see the satisfaction in her eyes. "It's over, baby girl. Really over." The news should have felt more momentous, but after 6 months of building something positive, the legal conclusion felt like an epilogue rather than a climax. Justice had been served, but more importantly, they'd moved beyond simply seeking justice to creating something beautiful. What about the international arrests? 12 convictions so far, with more trials pending. The money laundering network has been completely dismantled. Elaine paused. They also found something interesting in Samantha's personal effects. She pulled out a small wooden box and set it on the desk. Inside, nestled in silk, was an ornate perfume bottle that Marissa recognized immediately. The original Garden of Orange Blossoms prototype. The one I thought was destroyed in the fire. She kept it all these years. As a trophy, apparently. The prosecutors are releasing it to us as part of the final settlement. Elaine lifted the bottle carefully, as if it might disappear again. "I thought you should have it." Marissa took the bottle, feeling the weight of history in her hands. Unlike the utilitarian bottle that had hidden the evidence, this one was clearly an artist's creation, hand-blown glass with intricate silver filigree that caught the morning light. "It's beautiful. It was your father's design." The words hung in the air like incense. Marissa looked up sharply. "My father. David Moreau. He was a glass artist I met at a craft fair in Vermont. We had a brief relationship, but he died in a car accident 3 months before you were born." Elaine's voice was gentle. "He never knew about you, but he would have been so proud of who you've become." Grant reached over and squeezed Marissa's hand as she processed this final piece of her family history. A father who'd been an artist, a mother who'd been a master perfumer, and a daughter who'd chosen to build rather than destroy. "There's more," Elaine continued. "David's family reached out after the news coverage. They want to meet you, want to share stories about your father. Apparently, you have his hands." Marissa looked down at her hands, which had learned to work with delicate equipment and volatile essences. "I'd like that." "Good, because I invited them to the opening ceremony this afternoon." The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Elena offered a traditional blessing. Elaine spoke about the importance of preserving artisanal knowledge, and Marissa welcomed the students to their new creative home. But the moment that would stay with them forever came at the end, when Elena produced a small vial of copal incense and invited everyone to share in a ceremony of remembrance and hope. As the sacred smoke rose into the mountain air, Marissa thought about all the paths that had led to this moment. Her mother's courage in the face of deadly opposition, Grant's determination to seek justice for his fallen partner, Elena's preservation of ancient wisdom, even Travis's final choice to do the right thing, despite 15 years of cowardice. "What are you thinking about?" Grant asked as the crowd began to disperse. "How many people had to make the right choice for us to end up here? And how many people will make better choices because of what you started here?" That evening, as the last visitors departed and the institute settled into peaceful quiet, Marissa found herself in the memorial garden Elena had created behind the main building. A small plaque marked the spot where they'd buried the fragments of the evidence bottle, and beside it grew a young orange tree, a cutting from the original tree at Carter's fragrance house, somehow surviving in a greenhouse at the USDA for 15 years. Her family gathered around the tree as the sun set behind the mountains. Elaine and Elena, Aunt Helen, Grant, and even some of David's relatives who'd driven down from Vermont. They weren't connected by blood alone, but by choice, by shared commitment to building something beautiful from something broken. "Your mother would be proud," Aunt Helen said, though of course she was talking to both mothers present. "She is proud," Elaine corrected gently. "She's here with us, in every scent we create, every student we teach, every tradition we preserve." As darkness fell and the last light faded from the sky, the garden filled with the fragrance of orange blossoms, not artificial or manufactured, but growing wild and free under the Carolina stars. It was the scent of justice, of family, of home, and for the first time in 15 years, it was the scent of the future,